Welcome to the final episode of Season 1 of NAPABA Coffee House. It has been such a great pleasure and an honor to work on NAPABA Coffee House over the course of this semester. I mean, what an absolute privilege to have had a front row seat to learn from the legendary Larry Tu and all of our GC guests. And so from the bottom of my heart, a big thank you to everyone who's made this happen. So a big thank you to our host, Larry, to all our guests, Lola, John, Marie, Alan, Dawn, Sam, Sandy, Caroline, and Amy. A big thank you to Wilson Chu and the NAPABA In-House Counsel Network. A big thank you to Kenneth, our video editor. A big thank you to Professor Wilkins, Brian, and Dana at the Harvard Law School Center on the Legal Profession. Thanks to NAPABA, to our sponsors, and most importantly, to you, to our audience. Thank you for taking the time to watch NAPABA Coffee House and for giving us your support. We wanted to create NAPABA Coffee House because we wanted to celebrate an amazing group of Asian American trailblazers, and also because we wanted to create a free, publicly available resource with insights and advice for the law students and the lawyers who are coming up after them. And I think that together we've all created a project that we can all be proud of. So thank you, everyone. Teamwork makes the dream work. All right, so final episode for Season 1. Today's guest is Amy Tu, Chief Legal Officer at Tyson Foods, one of the world's largest food companies. Its segments include beef, chicken, pork, and prepared foods. Prior to joining Tyson Foods in 2017, Amy was at the Boeing Company, where she held leadership positions in law, corporate development, and strategy. Amy also held in-house roles at The Gap and Walmart. So if you'll allow me to make a dad joke, we've always described NAPABA Coffee House as a series of one-on-one conversations with leading general counsels. Well, today, for the first time ever, with Larry Tu and Amy Tu, we'll have a two-on-two conversation. All right, without further ado, here's Larry and Amy.
Let me start by welcoming you, Amy, to the NAPABA Coffee House. We really appreciate your taking the time to do this with us. You have recently stepped up to a greatly expanded senior business and legal role at Tyson Foods, so your plate must be extremely full right now. I should add that although this session could be dubbed 2-on-2, we are in fact not related. Our family names are actually different in Chinese. And indeed, you and I only met for the first time on Zoom to prepare for this session. So I am very much looking forward to learning more about you and your personal and professional journey. I want to say a big thank you for making time for us today.
Well, thank you, Larry. And I must say that even though we're not related, I feel like we're related because I have been following you since your GC position at Dell. And I always wondered whether or not we were related or whether you could give me a job.
Okay, well, with that, so let's start at the beginning, as we always do. I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal and family history, how your parents came to immigrate into North America, and how you started your early life.
Sure. Well, my parents are originally from China, the Hubei province in Hebei. And my parents met in Canada. And the story is that my dad was working and studying in Nova Scotia, and through family connections, he met my mother, who also went to Canada, but just to be a teacher, actually. And they met in Halifax, and then they ended up moving to Calgary, Canada, and where I was born. And, they tell me all the time how much they enjoy traveling in their little blue Volkswagen Beetle across the Canadian hinterlands. And so we stayed in Canada for a couple of years. And then my parents moved to Arkansas, where my father had University of Arkansas to start their economics program, their mathematical component of the economics program at the university. And so I grew up actually not far from the headquarters of Tyson Foods. I grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and really, had an interesting childhood until high school. But I think as a Chinese family, one of the very few Chinese families in Northwest Arkansas, it was just a different time. It was the early 70s. And, I never really never felt different. The community has always been very, very supportive. But as you get older and you're reconnecting with your parents and talking about what happened in the early years, you learn more and more about perhaps the challenges they had to overcome while living in the South, and being one of the very few Chinese families. But that's the long and short of it.
Amy, I'm a huge fan and I'm an addict of Chinese food. And I know that we talked about the fact that when you grew up in Arkansas, there might have been one Chinese restaurant in the entire city.
That's right.
It was called something like the egg roll or something like that. Is that right? Yeah. And there might have been one other Asian family with a son who was a classmate.
He was a classmate of mine, and everybody thought we would get married because we were both Chinese. And the funny thing is that he grew up in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, and he became a doctor, which his family is very, very proud of, and which my family is very proud of. But we ran around in the same circles together, very studious, but also interested.
Was that a circle of two? Just you and him?
No. We had a circle of diverse friends. But the funny thing is that when I returned to Arkansas to take on this position, I found out that he was living in my neighborhood, the neighborhood that I bought a house in. And so isn't that hilarious? But
yeah, what a small world. What a small world. Now, growing up in that town back then with very few other Asian families around, you said you didn't feel that different, but you must have felt the difference to some degree. I think you were telling me the other day that your mom would occasionally say to you something like, and I love this statement, why don't you invite your friends over for some soy sauce chicken legs? So tell me how that went over with your friends.
Like a lead balloon. I still remember my best friend, Courtney. She grew up in Arkansas and Oklahoma, and we were on the pom-pom squad together. And our families would trade off taking us to ball games. And so one day I said, hey, Courtney, why don't you come over? My mom is making chicken legs. You'll love them. And she said, what? What do you mean chicken legs? And she came over and she just looked at these chicken legs that my mother was putting on her plate, like one after another. And she said, I don't really understand what this is, because there was soy sauce just covering the chicken legs. And she had never really eaten it before. I'd never seen a chicken leg that wasn't fried.
So you were pushing diversity from an early age, diversity and culinary experiences.
Great way to look at it.
Yeah. So from there off to college to Wellesley, where I think you were at Wellesley and you were also in the ROTC program.
Right.
So you might have been one of a handful of Wellesley students, with both of those activities, and that must have felt a little bit. You must have felt a little bit of an outlier there because of that.
Yeah, I guess what I also would say is the reason I went to Wellesley was because of Hillary Clinton. She was the first lady during Bill Clinton's tenure as governor in the state of Arkansas, and she's one of the reasons why I ended up at Wellesley. But I think I wasn't really prepared for what Wellesley was going to offer. Which was, as we all know, an aggressive and tough curriculum. But with my Air Force ROTC scholarship, I also had to enroll in the ROTC program, so it's the military program. And it was not easy, because I was at a women's liberal arts college during a period of time in the world where the military was seen as really the not in the best light. And I had to travel, taking the college bus to MIT, to Cambridge, where fellow ROTC scholarship recipients were where we took our classes. So there were students from Harvard and Boston College, Boston University, MIT, Wellesley, and we were on the weekends, once a week in the evenings, we would be studying, we would be running our drills. So I think it wasn't easy, because during that period of time, there really was quite a bit of pushback on the military. And being a liberal arts school that Wellesley is, I faced a little bit of controversy because I was wearing my cadet uniform around the college, but not overt. Just it was a matter of women taking positions against the military, and you just had to deal with it.
So ROTC was a way to pay for college, but also, as I understand it, you had thoughts of becoming a pilot.
Yes.
So tell me about it. Was it were you going to be like a fighter pilot, or what did you have in mind?
Well, at that time, women were not allowed to be fighter pilots. They were pilots for transport, really, cargo and transport. And I've always loved flying. I've always loved the thrill of travel. But to serve my country and to do so in the Air Force as a pilot was really exciting to me. But as part of the requirements for becoming a pilot in the Air Force, you actually have to meet a certain threshold with your eyesight. And I guess I read too many books in the dark, not qualify. So my dream.
So there went that career. Yeah.
My dreams were shattered, but I ended up at Boeing later on. So I feel like it was great.
Now, after college, you went on to a couple of business jobs in business and finance. And I think you were headed maybe toward an MBA at that point in your life. So that's clearly been being a business person and a business executive has always been part of your thoughts about your future career.
Yeah, I ended up majoring in economics at Wellesley. And one of my favorite classes was financial markets, and as well as macroeconomics. I even have this caricature that my friends put together that had me and with a big face and a suit on, and it said Wall Street in the back, and just said, next CEO. And but it's just because I really enjoy, when you find a class or you find something you really love, you immerse yourself in it. So I was lucky enough to have a position with Merrill Lynch, which is no longer Merrill Lynch, but Merrill Lynch down on Wall Street, the World Financial Center. And it was one of those 2 to 3 year analyst programs in investment banking. My specialty was high yield bonds, junk bonds, as it was called at the time. And we were just hitting the peak of junk bonds. And you may remember that Drexel sort of collapsed, imploded. And all of a sudden it became the restructuring group. So we went from being high yield junk bonds to restructuring. And so I worked on a lot of the reorganizations that companies were faced with as a result of the junk bond market collapsing. So I did that for a couple of years. I wanted to go to business school. And at the time, there was just really an oversupply of investment bankers who were applying to business school. And one of my friends said, your best chances for getting into one of the schools that you wanted to attend was to have a different experience in business. So I had a friend who worked at Saks Fifth Avenue in the corporate department. She was a buyer for men's apparel. And she said, hey, well, if you're interested, I know there's a position open in the cosmetics group. And so I interviewed for a position with Saks, and I was lucky enough to get that job. So I became a buyer for cosmetics. So Chanel, I think at the time, Estee Lauder, Givenchy, it was cosmetics and perfumes. And what was really interesting to me was the fact that if you think about cosmetics is really different from fashion, because fashion works on trends according to the seasons, and cosmetics is actually a financial business. So a lot of what I learned at Merrill Lynch was easily translated to the buying department for Ford Cosmetics.
Yeah.
There's a couple things I did after college.
And then you took a break and decided that you would go work on a political campaign, right?
Right.
You went home.
Right.
Yeah.
Part of my plan was to go to business school. I spent a year at Saks. And one of the reasons why I decided to go back to go to Arkansas was because Bill Clinton had announced his candidacy for president, and this is the first round. And I said, well, this is terrific. I love politics as well. I want to support the Clintons, and so I'll go home. I'll live at home. I'll work on my applications, and it'll just be terrific.
And I'm sure your parents were thrilled to have you back in the house and vice versa, right?
So thrilled to have, a New Yorker, 20 some odd year old at home in Arkansas. I think it was really one of those growing moments where, you and your parents are at different stages of your lives. And my parents, I remember that my dad distinctly saying, Amy, you're not making any money. You're working on some political thing that is never going to make you any money. And, you're working on these applications for business school that's going to cost another, I think at the time, $100,000. And, I think that constant ringing in my ears from my dad and then my mom saying to me was just, it got to the point where my mother said, why don't you just go to law school? If you don't want to be a doctor, you're working on these applications, why don't you look at law school? It was parental pressure.
So your law school path was as fortuitous as that. It wasn't really necessarily all that premeditated.
I will have to say, I'll be very honest, Larry. I did not like LA Law. I did not like any of those shows.
So you were not an aspiring female Arnie Becker, right? This is not your role model.
No. I was more of, barbarians at the gate. But I think because my mom had made the suggestion and my parents were, of the opinion that I was not spending my time wisely, I did explore the legal profession, and I spent a lot of time talking to people who were in political positions. I spoke to a lot of judges. I spoke to a lot of lawyers. And here's the one thing that I learned from all of the interviews and discussions I had. They all said to me, Amy, the best thing you could do is actually to go to law school. And the reason why is because law school will teach you a way of thinking. It's based on logic. There are rules. It will help you no matter what you do. If you decide to go back to business school or go back into business, having a law degree and having that training will be invaluable.
Yeah.
And I think those comments really resonated with me, to think of it not as becoming a lawyer, but think of it as an education and a way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I credit my mother and my father, of course, for my career, but also for all the people who I spoke with about attending law school.
Well, you credit them now. Maybe you didn't credit them at the time when they were putting pressure on you.
I was, there was like a secret box that I kept with all my comments about them.
So let's talk about your legal career, which is you've done an amazing variety of roles. You've been with one company for a very long time, but the one thing you haven't done is work for a law firm, because you went really straight from law school into an in-house position at Walmart. Yeah. So was that a deliberate decision to not go to a law firm, or did it just happen that way? It wasn't necessarily planned.
I think a couple of things. One is when I was in law school, I actually worked for a law firm, so I did need to just earn some extra money, and
Right.
so I worked about 2.5 years for a law firm. Now, when I was exploring my career options, I had just, I had one assignment that I really enjoyed, and that was working with a federal judge. So I was working for the chief judge of the Western District at the time, Judge Waters, who I loved dearly. He taught me so much about, being a judge, and really gave me an experience where I could feel the gravity, of particular situations. The fact that a judge has so much influence over people and decisions. And I wanted to be a clerk after law school, and so I began to explore that avenue. And he had already hired someone from another school to be his clerk, and so he did not have a position available for me. So I started to explore that that path. I knew that I really didn't want to work for a law firm. I thought I was going to return to business. And, I think as a matter of just making sure I had some insurance policies, I did apply to a few jobs. So I just sent out my resumes to a few companies. And I just still remember this. I sent a resume to Walmart for, I think it was like a tort position, and I'm horrible at tort. I mean, the professor will tell you she's a disaster. And I received a phone call from the general counsel at the time, because he has seen my resume, and he said, Amy, this is Robert Rhodes. I'm the general counsel of Walmart. And I said, I said, hello. And he said, look, I saw your resume for some position, and I'm impressed because you had this business experience. And he said, I just have one question for you. What would you do if you could have any job in the world? And I said, I would love to practice international law somehow. And he said, I want you to come down and visit with me, because we have a position open for international, because they were just starting their expansion internationally. And so the reason why I said international is I just came off of a fantastic course on comparative law. And so we were talking about law in China, law in what is now known as the European Union, and then compared against the United States legal system. And so I went to interview with him, and I got the job. So I know it's very, very atypical in the traditional way of thinking about lawyers and lawyers' career paths, but he saw the sort of the business experience as an asset. He knew that I was a baby lawyer, first year out, but had tremendous experience working in New York in different settings. And, I think part of being a business lawyer, a really good business lawyer, is being able to show up in front of your clients in a way that gives them confidence, and also in a way where you're candid, that if you do not know the answer to something, you say, I don't know the answers to that, but let me get back to you, right? Yeah.
So you had the unusual experience of actually designing your very first legal job.
I suppose that's it.
which is pretty unusual, right?
Yeah, it is. I had some luck, I guess. Yeah. So.
And your business background clearly served you well, although perhaps you didn't even know it at the time, but it actually ended up being a huge plus in terms of how you were viewed by the Walmart General Counsel.
Yeah. I mean, you've worked with corporations for a long time, and I think what really distinguishes lawyers, really good lawyers, from lawyers, is the fact that you understand business. that you're solutions oriented, that you can, chart a path for the business, that you can understand risks to the business, and you can read a balance sheet and an income statement, understand cash flows. I think that was those fundamentals I learned on Wall Street have served me time and time again.
Yeah,
really
perfect. Well. Now, from there, you went on to a job at Gap, which didn't last that long.
No.
So that ended up being, perhaps in hindsight, not a great move, but you probably learned something from that. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, look, I don't know if I would say it's a great move or not a great move. I think these are all just, experiences that shape a person. I left Walmart because I really wanted to leave Arkansas, because I wanted to continue to have experiences. I knew that if I stayed at Walmart, I would likely stay here for a very long time. And I, through my network of connections, I had a friend, Michelle Banks, who went on to become the GC of the Gap. And I reached out to her when I was exploring possibilities to, get more experience, have more experiences in the legal profession. And she said, you know what, I have a position coming up. We have a position coming open here at the Gap. Transactions, because that was my background, M&A, corporate finance transactions. She said, we have an opening, we're expanding internationally. Would love to have you, interview with us and then potentially join us. So I joined the Gap, based in San Francisco. And I really, I, as a consumer, love the Gap. I loved the jeans. I loved Banana Republic. I loved Old Navy. And so I really connected with the product, which I think is important when you're going in-house. But what I struggled with was the culture. It was very different from Walmart. It was a culture that was, it wasn't what I was accustomed to, right? I mean, I think working on Wall Street, working on Walmart, you're pretty buttoned up. You're wearing a jacket or you're wearing a suit, and at the Gap, it's just a whole different world. It's everyone's in their khakis and their flip-flops and their hoodies, and that's rightly so, right? Those are the products that they make. But I was just having a really hard time shifting from like my jacket that I bought at Talbot's, or I got like trying to button down. And frankly, a lot of the clients, the internal clients, were much younger than I was. And I think I was in my 30s or something, but they were much younger. And that also was different. Right. So I think it was a hard adjustment. But I mean, I loved my time there, but it was just I think a transition that was difficult, coming from such a hardcore company that was focused on, sort of being buttoned up and being organized and talking to, some very senior people about issues that were not about, sort of fashion and trends and IT and marketing. So it was an adjustment that was difficult for me.
I mean, if you were giving advice to younger attorneys who are thinking about, switching careers or switching companies or whatever, clearly the question of fit and suitability and culture are really important things, which maybe they don't necessarily realize. So what advice would you give them based on your own experience? I mean, clearly Gap's a great company.
Yeah.
I'm sure you learned a lot there, but somehow the fit wasn't just right. And so there's something to be taken from that experience.
Yes. And my advice would be do your homework, and then also self-reflection. And I'm seeing this with some of our attorneys too. It may not be the right fit at that point in time in your life, right? I think you just have to really know what you want at that point in time. If you're 30 years old and you still love going out to restaurants and bars, and you're doing your TikTok and you're hip and you love your fashion, Arkansas is probably not going to be the best place for you. That's all. I mean, just be very candid, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's important for you to know who you are at that point in time and understand the culture of the company that you may be accepting a position from, because the culture of that company also is going to be important in terms of whether or not it's something that you believe in, something that fits you at that point in your life. And it's it may not be the right fit for everyone, but I think it just takes a little bit of reflection, self-reflection. So.
Now, from there, you went on to Boeing, and maybe it was your aviation interest. I don't know how that came about, but you then had a fantastic, illustrious career at Boeing. If I count the places you went to, Chicago, London, Seattle, Washington, D.C., Virginia, I mean, you went all over the world.
Yes.
Doing a whole variety. It seemed like each job you took was another stretch assignment from the one you did before, where you were learning new skills and new capabilities, and not necessarily staying in your strike zone. You were actually branching out into new areas. So that sounds like a tremendous part of your career in terms of learning and growth.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I received a call from a recruiter while I was working at the Gap, and I was not really looking. I was trying to adjust. I was still adjusting to the Gap. And when he pitched Boeing to me, I just said, oh my gosh, this is like, it's going to be bureaucratic. These are my biases, right? Slow. What am I going to learn there? And he said, just be open. So I went to visit at the time, the Seattle headquarters. And wow, I just couldn't believe the products. There were rocket scientists everywhere. The lawyers were working on really impactful things for the company and for the nation. And so I was so impressed that I said yes to the job. The funny thing was that Boeing had announced it was going to move its headquarters to one of 3 locations. And would I be comfortable at any 3 of the locations? Because they had not yet decided. And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. Chicago, Denver, or Dallas. And no problem.
So you were completely flexible in terms of where.
Completely flexible. Yeah. And I think sometimes you just gotta go with it. And so the job was in Chicago at the new headquarters. And I was really lucky to work with some fantastic people. My job was really around, again, corporate, securities, finance, M&A, subsidiary governance. And I was able to work on some of the supporting documents for the board. And it was great. It was wonderful. But it also, what also happened was 9/11. And I just remember where I was when I saw the first plane and then the second, and being with Boeing at the time, it was a wake-up call, I think, in terms of the importance of the company, but also the importance of life, right? And really, what do you want to do in life? And I loved being a lawyer, but I had an opportunity, roll forward. I had an opportunity many months later to work for my client, my internal client. So to be an M&A lead on the business side. And I did that for a little while until my husband told me, hey, my then boyfriend, hey, I'm headed to London. And I said, what? He had an opportunity in London, and he said, you're coming with me, right? And I said, well, I don't have a role, and my M&A role needed to be in Chicago because, as you probably know, from a corporate perspective, it should be it's at headquarters. And so I went back to the law department and I said, hey guys, I left on friendly terms, and I said, I know we don't have any in-house counsel abroad. Would you give me a chance to see whether or not there's an opportunity to be a lawyer in London for Boeing? And as you can imagine, it was a lot of, maybe, I don't know, we don't have enough information. And I said, tell you what, I'll just go out with my husband if you'll allow me to kind of go back and forth, and I'll just do it on my own. And they said, okay, well, why don't you go out and try it and let us know? And so,
So, Amy, this is like a second time you created your own job.
yeah, I
So this is the beginning. This sounds like a pattern for you.
take opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And because if there's an open space, go after it.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I moved to London. I didn't have an expatriate package. I said I was going to go and do my diligence, bring back the facts, and so it was I loved it because it was a great opportunity to do a little bit of what people call business development. You go out there and you talk to people you've never met before, and you try to tell them the value and show them the value that you can bring. And over the course of about 8 to 9 months, I was able to demonstrate to the very skeptical sales guys over there that actually having a lawyer in the same time zone, in front of their customers, where we can solve problems with respect to their contracts or their financing, it was like a revelation to them. They're like, oh my goodness, we can just take you. We can go and see X client with us, and we can talk about the engines and the aircraft contracts and the financing. And so there was quickly people saw that there was value to having a lawyer. And then the same thing on the defense side, where I was able to just do the smallest things. I mean, for a lot of these FCPA purposes, you have to submit documents if you're going to give a gift to a government official or to a customer. And there are a lot of procedural aspects that you have to go through. Well, I will tell you that salespeople and a lot of our people who had interface with customers and government officials, they knew they needed to comply, but oftentimes it gets really complex. And so having a resource in the same time zone on ground to help them, help shepherd them through the process and explain why it's important was invaluable. So, kind of just very basic things, but they were opportunities to show value as a lawyer. So I went back to the Chicago office. I told them, here's what I found. Here's a business case for you. Here's how many lawyers I think you would need. And so they credited me with being one of the founding members of what became the Global Law Affairs Group. It was a practice group where now we have regional counsels around the world and country counsels in many of the countries where the company had business operations. And so that was, for me, one of my proudest moments, to just be a founding member and to have had that opportunity to do that. So,
Well, it sounds like you were incredibly effective at advocating for the importance of that role, and you sold to the salespeople the importance of having lawyers on the ground, which is pretty amazing.
It just takes a business case. Just say, I can give you this much value if you do this. But
now, let's talk about your move from Boeing to your current company, where you became a public company GC for the first time.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people find that jump really challenging. It's almost like a quantum leap, and they almost feel like you have to be a GC to get a GC job.
Yes.
But if that were really true, there wouldn't be any GCs because nobody could ever get started. So,
exactly.
So how did that leap happen for you, and how difficult was that?
I think the way to think about this is my career at Boeing was fantastic. That company, along with the other two companies, gave me, plenty of opportunities to build experiences. And, my view was that I had experience in just about every functional area of a lawyer, and had managed when I was abroad, in London, managed like a general counsel, managed the issues, whatever issue it was, on the defense side or commercial side, litigation, transactional, and intellectual property, all of the different issues that you would see. And so when I was thinking about my career and what I really wanted, I said to myself, I really want to be a general counsel, but I know I'm not a sitting general counsel. And I was one chair away from, being a direct report to a general counsel. But I think the thing that really motivated me to do more was the fact that I had a disappointment. because I had I checked the boxes in all of these functional areas, and I had proven myself as a mini general counsel. I was talking to one of my key business clients at Boeing, who went on to become very senior, and he said to me, I'm going to put you forward for that next role, that role that would report to the general counsel. And I said, great. And I said, what else do I need to do to make sure that I have the best chance possible? And so he sort of gave me, some feedback, and I talked to a number of other people just to make sure that I was positioned correctly. And all things were looking great. Feedback was coming back great. And I remember that I went on vacation, and I received a phone call from somebody who would not expect to call me. And he said, very sorry, but you're not going to get the job. And that was it. I was like, what? And this person could not explain to me why. This person explained to me who was going to get it. And the person who did get it, in my view, was not even qualified for the role, and didn't have all the things that I had, and it didn't have the sponsorship. And so that was one of the most devastating moments for me, because I had worked at the company for more than a decade. I had done everything right. I had positioned myself politically, and yet I still faced disappointment.
And you had sponsors in the company who spoke on your behalf. You had built relations. You had done basically all the things that people tell one to do to kind of position for the next role.
Yes.
Yeah. And it just didn't happen.
It just didn't happen. And you can read whatever you want into it. I read I spent a lot of time being angry and crying and, racking my brain over what did I not do, or what was wrong with me. And my husband, who I just adore, he just said, you got to pull yourself out of this. This isn't about you. This is not about you. Right? You have everything that it takes. What you need to do is you need to build your path to what you really want. And so I, after a lot of, yelling and screaming, I just decided I was going to put down on a piece of paper exactly what I wanted, and then how I was going to go about getting what I wanted. And just thinking more, taking the emotion out of everything, and just saying to myself, you know what, I think it's time to leave. I think it's time to leave. I'm not going to wait anymore. I think I need to move on. Even though I've loved the people in the company, but I'm just going to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it took a lot of, organization. I put a code name around it. I had a project for it. I made myself every day. I said, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. I'm going to make these connections. I think that to make that leap, you really have to want it, and you have to be purposeful in your actions. While still being true to yourself, right? And knowing where your shortfalls are.
Well, I mean, it sounds like that setback, disappointment really motivated you to get organized, but it also sounds like your incredible breadth of experience that you've built up along those years really served you well for the next move.
Yeah. Larry, I mean, we could spend hours talking about what it's like to be a general counsel. It is not the world that I thought. It's it's incredibly intense, and I think. Well,
so on that, tell me what's the hardest thing about the job for you. And some things obviously will come naturally, but what's been the biggest challenge in this new role for you?
I think it's two things. One, it's letting go and letting your team be accountable for the decisions that they make. And I think number two, it's people. Engaging people, inspiring people, developing people. That has been just the challenge that I did not I think I knew I would need to work on it, but that I just underestimated the importance of.
Well, I mean, I got to think that your prior roles, you had some glimmer of that and you had some experience, but maybe when you're the GC, it sort of leaps up into a different scale that you ever had before, right? For the first time.
Yeah, that's right. Because what you want to make sure is that you have a pipeline of talent and that you are, just really consciously making sure that people have that path, but also the feedback. And when you're, creating a team and you're bringing in new people and you're developing people who've been with the company, you have to work through all of those dynamics. And that can be very exhausting. I think on top of all of that, Larry, I think it's the environment that we live in today where DE&I has become incredibly important, not just for the reasons that we believe, but also because we have generations now that have different expectations and different ways of expressing themselves. And
by DEI, you're referring to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Diversity, equity, inclusion. Yes, yes. And I think the environment is highly charged. And I think working through the needs of each team member, because each team member who comes to work brings their entire life story with them. And that's the thing that I think we're starting to appreciate, which is you don't look at, Amy as just a GC, look at her as someone who's come through, her own journey, as they say, and brings along with her a lot of baggage, a lot of, experiences, a lot of things that will shape how she responds or how she acts. And so that is really complex.
You are, I think, one of the key leaders for your company on the on DEI matters. Mm-hmm. And does being a woman and being a diverse member of the team make that job easier or harder or just more complicated?
I think in some ways it's harder. I think the expectations on you are more. I think that, and that's from really the team members, right, to help advance a lot of their issues. I also think that, if you didn't have someone who was passionate about it, just because I'm a woman and, I'm Asian, if you don't have someone leading, you're not going to create the kind of culture that you may want. And so if the color of my skin and my gender help, then I'm all for it, right? Yeah. Because I think I want to leave this place in a better place than it was before. And I have to make that impact. So I take it upon myself as my passion, my responsibility. But boy, there's a lot of expectation.
Well, and this is well beyond your role as being the senior kind of GC of the company. I mean, this is really you as a business leader, as an executive, and as a leader of these important initiatives that goes well beyond your day job, right? And so it's an add-on to everything else you're expected to do.
Yeah, it's look, I love it, especially when I'm around people. So we'll travel. I'll take a team with me to one of our facilities in some location. And when you just see the people there and the kind of, the kind of impact that they're making, which is meaningful to the company, and you take that energy around inclusion and around diversity and you bring it back to the office, it's a great feeling, but it's exhausting because one of my team members said, who went on the trip with me, she said, when I, got in the car to come back, I was exhausted. I fell asleep because you're just pouring so much energy into engaging people and talking about inclusion and the importance of inclusion and understanding what they're doing as best practice. That's the most exhausting, but also the most rewarding part of this job.
I mean, it must be interesting for you as well. I mean, now you've come full circle, you've traveled the world. Now you're back in your hometown, where you sort of grew up, and you're doing all of this great work. And I'm sure your parents' journey, in their early life was also full of challenges. And some of that may resonate with you as you think about these issues in this current era that you're dealing with as a senior business executive, right? I mean, they've come a long way, and the issues are still there for lots of people.
Yeah. They never say it. My dad doesn't really say very much. I mean, I probably have had maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 pages of words our whole lifetime, and like maybe a handful of hugs.
Yeah.
But I know he loves me, and I know he's proud of me because he shares with my mother these articles. Look at what Amy's doing now. So I know he's tracking me.
Yeah.
But I think that their love has been unconditional. They just said, don't worry about what we went through. You just need to make other people's lives better, and give back to the community, give back to society.
Amy, this has been an incredible conversation. I love the journey you've been on. We're close to the end. I do want to ask you one other thing, which is I noticed that one of the things that you're working on is the 6th edition of Cecilia Tu's China Cookbook. So I want to hear, and I gather Cecilia Tu is your mother.
My mother.
So tell me about this project. And I also want to know what your favorite recipe is.
Oh, so my mother, and I'll just share with you, when I was growing up, everybody loved Cecilia. I mean, I was in the shadow of my mother my entire life because Cecilia was the most caring, giving. She made the best egg rolls. She made the best dumplings. She made the best Chinese food in a world, of course, where there was not a lot of Chinese restaurants.
Don't forget the chicken feet.
Yeah. Chicken feet and the intestines. Okay. So, she was just like this icon in Arkansas. And she decided she was going to write a cookbook, and part of it was because she wanted to raise funds for my brother. I have a brother who's disabled, and she wanted to make sure that she was giving back to the community, but also raising funds for different groups that support my brother. And so over the years, I remember she sold this for like $2, like this cookbook for $2. And for years, she would just keep it at $2. So each edition she would do would be like $2. And so finally I said, well, Mom, let me help you. Let me, and I think it was just when I was in high school or college or something. I said, well, let me start editing the cookbook for you, and maybe we can make it a little bigger. And
this is applying your early business skills and instincts already.
Yeah. So I was for hours on end, and I don't know if you remember this. For hours on end, I would be sitting at a computer at like Kinko's copier, because computers were not readily available, right? And so I'd be at Kinko's and I'd be like typing up the typesetting and typing these recipes. And then I'd go to my mother and I'd say, Mother, are you sure this is like half a cup of soy sauce for this tiny little dish? She's like, yeah, it's just like half cup, I guess. Yeah, I just throw everything in. And so there was a process of trying to get all the recipes right. Anyway, roll forward, and we've been editing this cookbook. And while I'm on the 6th edition, she has decided that, Amy, make this your own. Let's modernize this, make it, our cookbook, right? So I'm done with the recipes. I'm now trying to find someone to cook the recipes, test the recipes, and take photos. So if anyone knows,
that's not going to be you.
No. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the cookbook. And in terms of favorite dish, I think my favorite dish are her pork chive dumplings, the pan fried pork chive dumplings that she hand makes with the dough.
One of my favorites too. It always comes back to dumplings, I think.
It always comes back to dumplings. And I can make them, so I'm happy about that.
Well, Amy, listen, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And this has been great fun. want to congratulate you on your brand new role with the company where you've taken on expanded responsibilities. We didn't have time to get into that, but maybe for another conversation, that'll be a follow-up. And good luck to you in your career and your larger enlarged senior executive role. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Larry.